Alright everyone, what is up? My name is Mechanical and welcome back to the channel for yet another video on Warhammer lore, history, learning, and I cannot wait to get into this one today because you guys know that I have been wanting to know more about the Eldar. Not the dark ones, absolutely fucking not. So Luetin, we found a video that he did and I can't wait to look into this. As per usual, this is a first time look into things. I'm completely new and I will probably have questions that I've had before, so please bear with me because yeah, this is a learning journey and I need to basically be told things 1,000 times before it sinks into this skull. And without further ado, thank you Luetin, let's go. Luetin. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Ooh, the lines you want to hear.
The Eldar. Created by the Old Ones, who are the most knowledgeable beings in the universe, but were destroyed in a fanatical genocide by the Necrons and Satan. The Eldar stood victorious, the unlikely benefactors in a war of unimaginable proportions, and now found their race in complete dominion of the known universe.
Like speedrunners from
now,
Star
just to
Wars.
mention again, as I did on the previous video, that the time we are dealing with here, as with much of the history in the 40k universe, is near speculation at best. After millions of years, facts and history are inclined to become cloudy. The Eldar history is one steeped in mythology and legend, so it's fair to say that you could lend some artistic license around the events of this period. As the lore of 40k is also very complicated, we'll learn today about the ancient history of the Eldar up to the 41st millennium. I'll then cover their race of the current period in a separate video. The war in heaven was over, and the Eldar stood unopposed in the universe. In this time we're speaking of the ancient Eldar. This is an important distinction to make between the modern Eldar of the 41st millennium. Ancient Eldar held a different mindset and outlook on their lives, and with good reason. Reason that we'll look at in due course. The ancient Eldar had been crafted and refined by the Old Ones for one purpose alone, and that was to destroy their enemy with vast psychic ability. It is possible that the Eldar gods spoken of at this time were actually weapons created by the Old Ones for them to wield. This is the version that I subscribe to. As a result of their naturally powerful psychic ability from the Old Ones' intelligent design, the Eldar are gifted with also unnaturally long lives by humanoid standards and intellects which would enable them to create some of the most precious and complex technological advances in the universe.
How
the next
long can they
events are
live?
particularly confusing. In essence, the Eldar gods, which it appears were initially immense psychic weapons created by the ancient Eldar with guidance from the Old Ones. They became living gods, such was their immense psychic energy and connection to the Eldar. The Eldar of the current day seem to have lost through the mists of time and their mythology this fact that the gods they worship were potentially created by themselves, albeit in their earliest, most ancient form, either directly or indirectly.
What? I'm already confused. I might have to replay that. Okay. Let's replay that. Okay, so first of all, what is great psychic ability? I'm now just wondering that, because you know, what I've seen in Space Marine 2 and all the other videos, you know, psychic abilities, it's like they're something to do with channeling the warp. So is it kind of like channeling an energy? Is that what it is? So I could, like, okay, crude, but please bear with me, like shoot lasers out of my eyes? Are we talking about that kind of thing? Are we talking about like levitating, using energy, you know what I mean, to, like, I don't know, blast rocks across the room? Is that what we're going for here? And he said that the Eldar, today's Eldar, distinction between now, 41st K. What's wrong with me today? Anyway, bear with. And the ancient ones, so the ones before Slaanesh, whatnot. We'll get to that, I'm pretty sure. They were an indirect or direct reason for their gods to have so much power, but they were created by the old ones due to the uprising of the Catan and the Necrons, right? So from the birth of the Eldar, did they, because they drew their psychic abilities, is this what he's trying to say? Is this what he's saying in the fact that, okay, the Eldar got their psychic power, which made the old ones stronger? Is that what he's trying to say? Clarification, please, someone. Help.
Each of the gods was known to gift the Eldar a trait and be part of their development. Eldar mythology states that Ayyyeeeee gave the Eldar wisdom so that they may know themselves. Isha gave the Eldar love so they may know one another.
Oh.
Vol gave the Eldar the artifice as a means to make their dreams become realities. Lilith gave the Eldar joy so they'd be happy in their lives. Kurnus gave them the ability to desire so that they would prosper. Muraheg gave the Eldar foresight so that they would know their place in the world. And lastly, Cain gave the Eldar anger so that they may have a means to defend their gifts. It then becomes even more complicated though. The Eldar in their legends refer to a time of war between their own gods as the War in Heaven. Now this is particularly confusing as you remember that the war between the Old Ones, Necron and Satan is also referred to as the War in Heaven. Now it seems likely that these events occurred during a period of cataclysmic war across the universe and at the same time have caused this period to have a blurred point of reference. Now when you consider this is all meant to have taken place some 60 million years ago, it seems very feasible that this would occur. The Eldar have focused more on their own gods in this time than the events between the Old Ones and Necron-Satan alliance. Given that the Eldar lost respect and communication with the Old Ones during the war, this would make sense, and that they potentially could lose some information about the period through the vast timescale and various events that have befallen them. Instead, they're focusing on the mythological aspect and their own gods, which are arguably of much more importance to the collective Eldar consciousness.
So the Eldar and Old Ones fell out during the war against the Necrons and Catan, basically, is that? I'm gonna make a guess if I've got this wrong. I think that's what he said. And the fact that there was called two War in Heavens is because they just completely separated themselves from each other. Wow. It's kind of, what a coincidence that they have the same name for something, but it was not intentional. Is there like something... Well, was the War in Heaven named by... So I would want to know if, okay, if it was the Old Ones that named it the War in Heaven and the Eldar, it would show that, you know, they're connected being because they were created by them. That would be really cool. And that would make sense to me. Okay. This is a lot to take in, so this is heavy. Only 4 minutes in and I feel like I've taken on like a bunch of information already. Oof.
The legend of the Eldar gods is very much one of mythology, so I'll cover that in a smaller subsidiary video. What I will say is that there was a period of strife amongst the Eldar gods pantheon. You'll hear that word a lot in reference to the Eldar gods. It simply refers to a council or circle. Think of the Greek gods of Olympus. Now this dark period of bloodshed and war was not just among the gods, but also against the Eldar themselves. This not only divided the Eldar from their gods, ceasing their ability to guide them. This period was a disaster in many ways, but the whole series of events was caused by a misreading of foresight borne by one of the gods. Now this miscalculation, in my opinion, actually doomed not only the gods themselves, but also the entire Eldar race. And I'll elaborate on all this in a future mythology video and what its implications were.
Okay, so the Old Ones were the gods of the Eldar until they separated. And then... So I don't know what happened then between... Is he still talking about the Ancient Ones? The Ancient Ones, you know, they broke up with the Old Ones during the war. And they then decided that there was other gods that they respected more. Who were these other gods? Yeah, like, that's kind of crazy. I guess it's possible, you know, in our world that there's a lot of different gods apparently going around. I mean, it can happen. Just spawns from an idea, doesn't it? Okay. Also, why did they fall out? Why did the Old Ones and the Eldar all of a sudden just not see eye to eye anymore? Lots of questions.
Now, as I said before, the origin of the Eldar gods is one of speculation, but I believe that these were weapons gifted by the Old Ones, or at least guided in creating them for the Eldar, and were masses of incredible psychic power. But when eventually the Eldar were left without the influence of the Old Ones, who had by then been extinguished, these masses changed from mere weapons to sentient life forms, the gods of Eldar civilization. Remembering that these powers were first created to combat the Satan, gods powerful enough to devour stars themselves, it stands to reason that the psychic weapons created for or by the ancient Eldar could transition to powerful entities within the Eldar race, given their immense psychic force.
Yeah.
Whilst we refer to them as weapons, it is not to say necessarily that they would have just been offensive. They could have been shielding, protective, or informative. And given the specific nature and description of each of the Eldar gods, I'm inclined to think that this is the case, and that these so-called weapons each had a function to bolster the Eldar in combating essentially what was an invincible army. So just to recap, during the earliest days of the Eldar, the Old Ones had helped them to develop and craft their psychic powers, knowledge, and skills. Over time though, and because of the war in heaven, the Eldar were left more and more to themselves to develop and advance. When the Old Ones were destroyed, they were at the point where they left entirely to forge their own way forward in the universe. After the war in heaven, that was the war of unimaginable proportions. Once that finished, and the Eldar had defeated the Necrons, the Satan were shattered across the universe by the Necrons, who then retreated into their tomb worlds, leaving the Eldar as the most powerful force in the universe.
Wait, sorry. I might have got that wrong. And I can't... As I said, there's going to be things that I just get mixed up in my head. Was it... Okay, so the Old Ones were destroyed. Was it the Catan or the Old Ones that were apparently put into little Pokeballs? Because they can't be destroyed. I'm now starting to believe it was perhaps the Catan. So I might have got that wrong. Can someone please let me know in the chat? Okay, let's continue.
With forces able to crush any who opposed them. An obvious comparison to this would be the Roman Empire in its advancement and strength over any other society at this time. Now, this situation obviously leaves the Eldar in an advantageous position in terms of societal advancement and growth. And grow they did, both in their technology, population, and most importantly their collective psychic power. Another problem at this time for the Eldar would be their gods, who were powerful psychic creatures and had up until now aided and guided the Eldar. Some of the more powerful ancient Eldar, like the earliest of their race, spoke to these gods in first-person terms and even fought against them. But all of this was to end. The gods were no longer entities that were able to assist and help shape the Eldar as they once had. Now they could only be contacted through spirit stones and help guide them in a much lesser way. So the Eldar would now enter a period of previously unequaled growth, a golden age in which they would spread their knowledge and culture wider than any that had gone before it. Such was their own dominance that over millennia they filled themselves with a great arrogance, a sense that all other races were below them, and all around them stood evidence of this, both in their technological success, their psychic powers, the beauty with which they inhabited new worlds far and wide. They were at the pinnacle of achievement, both technologically culturally, and in the size of their empire. They not
Going
only
so
lived
well for
long
them.
lives, but when they did die, their souls would return to the collective ether to be reborn into a new body, a psychic reincarnation. This enabled the Eldar to achieve a height of cultural technology that would nor could ever be equaled again.
So when the soul, we've been hearing that quite a lot in all these videos, that, an Eldar dies and their soul passes through and comes back. Do you remember? Do you remember everything? So you're just, constantly building on memories and knowledge and you're never losing anything. And yeah, I'm wondering, is that how it works? Or when you're born, you're kind of just like never knowing your previous life, your past life or whatnot? Interesting.
Over the vast periods of time involved here, literally millions of years, the Eldar reigned supreme. Their strength, pride, arrogance and avarice grew. Their sensibility and self-control waned and became less and less.
Oh no.
Their race was so advanced that they no longer needed to perform any physical or menial tasks, nor did they need to work to support their society. Their only causes were either self-betterment, the pursuit of knowledge, and most often of all, to indulge their desires, no matter how extreme. Now, whilst this may seem a deplorable thing, you must remember that the Eldar have far more powerful and overbearing emotions than humans, and this would lead them to indulging in ever more perverse ways to satisfy their desires, both through violence, cruelty, torture, sex, depravity. It became harder and harder for these extreme fanatics dedicated to dark pleasures to satisfy their decadent desires. So their acts became more violent and more creative. Soon, the streets were literally running with blood, and the insane bloodlusting roar of the swathes of citizens could be heard throughout the Eldar Empire.
Is that an Eldar?
Now, as you become desensitized to something over time, you have to push it further and further to achieve any enjoyment from it at all. And the Eldar in their lives, where they had literally nothing other to do at this time than pleasure addiction, was like a disease infecting the whole of the Eldar race. The Eldar slaughtered one another at the slightest whim and feasted on the corpses of their fellow kin. All the while, the world burned around them. Cults dedicated to nightmarish depravity grew rapidly across the Eldar society. Whole lands fell to the different aspects of arcane knowledge and sensual excesses. Billions upon billions of Eldar, numbers greater than you can possibly imagine, spread across worlds throughout the universe, all cascading towards the darkest epitome of emotional worship. Even before this time, it had been prophesied that the Eldar would fall. The Old Ones warned the Eldar about it, but their predictions and warnings were forgotten, dismissed, and ignored over time.
What? So they already knew? Excuse me? What? So their parents were literally just like, yeah, if you keep doing this, you're gonna get into trouble. And they're like, nah. Okay. But how did they know, these Old Ones? Did they like say, oh, if you keep doing this and if you... Well, I mean, obviously they said all that. You know, if you stop believing in us, if you stop, I don't know, doing all this and lose your way, then you're gonna die. So, I mean, that's fair enough. That's obviously what they all said. But, interesting that they had actually warned them. Very interesting. Arrogance. All to do with the arrogance.
However,
and also
it's not
forgetting
to say that all was a
them.
hopeless mess of suffering and exorbitant pleasures. Whilst many had slid into chasms of depravity, there were many who focused still on improvement, development, and the core tenets of the Eldar race. Discoveries by the Imperium of Man have found hints at just how far the Eldar had advanced with their technology. One of these ancient devices enabled the user to literally will anything they could imagine into existence, drawing on their vast psychic powers. If you could imagine legions of Eldar Guardians that would appear and be real and physical and have mass, you could build endless streams of fleets, even whole cities.
No way.
Whatever your imagination could be, you could create it using this highly advanced device.
No way. So they, you know, I was saying like, oh, can you shoot laser beams out your eyes and throw a brick across the room? No, you can create whatever you want with a device, a power device. Like, what? That is pretty cool. Pretty cool stuff. Does this still exist, by the way? I'd like to know. Does that device still exist somewhere? And who has it? Or who has the knowledge of it anyway? Wow. Wow. So no wonder they absolutely stormed through the galaxy. Because they could just create all these armies, like, at will. That's absolutely insane. And I guess, you know, like, with the actual... I know I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but with the birth of Slaanesh wiping out most of the Eldar was kind of necessary for the rest of, well, civilization and other species to develop again, or to just even develop. So, yeah. I wonder where this device is.
But on discovery of this device, it was deemed unusable. It had been tainted by the forces of chaos, of darkness. The idea of using such a device of such devastating power, that whilst it had been touched by chaos, is an unthinkable one for the Imperium. It goes to show, though, just how far the Eldar had developed, and who knows what other advantages of similar genius they had created, but have since lost.
This is true.
This period of wonder and decadence, however, could not last. Some saw it coming, although perhaps not quite understanding the gravity of what was to come. A group of Eldar known as Exodites concluded that the Eldar had grown to disgusting excess, and so left the homeworlds to live on fringe planets in a more sustainable, pure existence.
I've heard that. Okay.
At this time, a great many more of the Eldar
began
began to grow uneasy with the numbers and severity of the degradation of their society. Their seers, who had powerful precognition, warned that this dark path would lead surely to evil and suffering for the entire race.
They were told.
Yet more Eldar left the homeworlds of their empire, considering the remaining society unsalvageable and beyond help. They built great starships so massive they were near artificial planets. These are referred to as craft worlds.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Some of the strongest Eldar stayed on the homeworlds to selflessly try and alter the path their race had taken, believing it to be not too late to save their society of beauty from whatever horrors would lay ahead. Surely the Eldar could not be destroyed. How could the Guardians of the Galaxy fall when they had the most advanced technology, the most knowledge and power?
How could they fall? Huh. An interesting one, huh? Very interesting. Such a shame. I mean, at least people still believed, but definitely too far gone. The majority of them were lost to depravity and gruesome wants and needs.
So you see, the ancient Eldar had drifted from guidance by the Old Ones too early. And despite the warnings from the Old Ones, the sense of what could happen was never truly instilled into them.
Yeah.
This, combined with the fact that their own gods took over as the primary religion within the Eldar, meant they lost and ignored the truth of what they could face if they did not control their extremely powerful emotions.
They even created their own gods.
The Eldar were created for
their
one
gods
purpose,
were them anyway.
to destroy the Necrons and Satan through the use of psychic power and warp manipulation. They all have a powerful link to the warp, this parallel dimension of malleable energy. Over millions upon millions of years of sliding towards depravity, the Eldar's psychic emanations began to create form. This was continually added to and strengthened as things became progressively worse in the Eldar
Slaanesh
Empire.
is coming.
Souls of departed Eldar cultists and sacrifices forming a massive ball of negative psychic energy. This would cause such an imbalance within the warp dimension, it would actually create the immense psychic storms which humanity at this time would define as the Age of Strife. Without understanding it, they actually had a massive effect on other races at the time. The Eldar still had their webways to travel through the universe, but for any other races, interstellar travel and communication was rendered impossible by the high level of disturbance in the warp energy. This would last for millions of years and a hugely disruptive event for many other races.
Wow, so there was just this like massive knock-on effect.
But despite the most selfless efforts of the strongest Eldar back on Homeworld, and the cause for the endless emotional excesses to end, it barely abated. It became worse and worse, a downward spiral of disastrous proportions.
The domino effect.
Now, to any big society, this kind of horrific abuse would be a problem, but it was worse than could have been imagined for the Eldar. This mass of psychic energy that had been growing in the warp was now to reach a point of criticality. It would explode as it transformed inert psychic energy to a living consciousness of pure hate, suffering, and decadence. A reflection of the Eldar's millions of years of societal abuse and hedonism given nightmarish form. The psychic scream of the birth of Slaanesh was to be so powerful it would literally rip the fabric of the universe in two. It tore the souls of the Eldar within 1,000 light years, slaughtering the greatest number of Eldar in an instant. No one knows the figures involved in this loss, but it could be no less than trillions of lives, not to mention all of their homeworlds, and some of the craftworlds who had not even travelled far enough were annihilated in an instant.
Oh my
gosh. Their
gosh.
research and technology destroyed, the wonders in their culture, which had stood for millennia, obliterated. The Eldar gods, who despite being separated from the Eldar still cared and protected their followers, tried to combat and defeat Slaanesh, but all were slain or shattered, apart from just a couple of their gods who managed to escape the horror.
Oh, so some of the gods did survive.
Had truly lost everything in an instant. Only those who sheltered at distance in the wraithbone hulls of the craftworlds and exodite planets were spared, leaving a mere fragment of the Eldar behind. The Eldar race did not just fall at this time, it was nearly wiped from existence. The only other survivors were ironically the Dark Eldar. I'll make mention of this specific Eldar group another time, but the Dark Eldar were essentially a cult or a mix of cults who worshipped the most purely depraved side of the Eldar. They were part of the many who orchestrated the fall of the Eldar. They had created a home for themselves within the Eldar webway, and this protected them from the immense shockwave as Slaanesh came into being.
So they made a deal.
But this was only the beginning. The horror of what had occurred would not only haunt the Eldar for many millennia, but it would also unleash unseen nightmares into the reality of the world. Until this time,
BDSM.
dark forces from within the warp could only transition to reality by channeling themselves through a psyker or being summoned as so. With the warp and reality torn apart, these two now merged, and the horrors of the warp could easily bleed into the material universe, corrupting, destroying, and ravaging. It is also said that the Eldar homeworlds still exist, lost within the realm of the warp and chaos, suffering a never-ending nightmare of their own making of pure, demonic suffering for any Eldar who remain there.
Oh, okay, so the Eldar worlds that apparently were just like absolutely ripped out of this universe, even the people who tried to get away on the craft worlds, they just didn't get far enough away. So they could still be in there somewhere, but they're all just still doing the same thing, just suffering and killing each other for Slaanesh now. I mean, they're probably happy. Not the ones that didn't want to be there, but they're probably having the best time of their lives.
The tear in the warp dimension in reality would be known from this point onward as the Eye of Terror, and gave birth to the gateway for the myriad of forces known as Chaos. This devastating event had a wide-reaching effect on all races in the galaxy, and was far from over in the history of the universe of 40k. Since this time of darkness, which the Eldar refer to as the Fall,
crazy pictures,
it is spoken of understandably with sadness and humiliation. The Eldar are now broken and a scattered race, lacking a sense of unity and coordinated objective. The Exodite world saw all of these events confirm that their choice to abandon the ways of technology and hedonism was the right one, and consequently they've slipped into a more primitive technological level of subsistence and just existence. happy in its
Is that them
simplicity
fighting
and with no
Tyranids?
interest for the power that caused their destruction. The survivors of the Eldar homeworlds who had foresight enough to abandon their planets now drift through the stars in colossal nomad fleets, and the more strict and organised of these are the craft worlds. Created prior to the fall with the mission to preserve the true Eldar way of life, they are loaded with life forms, culture from their planet in both religion, biology, technology and politics. Each of these craft worlds remains independent of the others, and they have no commitments to one another.
Okay.
They will often ally one another in times of need, but their society is very much shattered from the days of the ancient Eldar and is just a shadow
nothing
of
to
its
do with
former
each other.
glory.
Fair enough.
The process of reincarnation that the Eldar once revered is also no longer possible, as they discovered after the fall that Slaanesh would snatch and devour their souls at the point of death. This prospect brings utter terror to the Eldar.
No way. So, even if you were never part of all that nonsense they were doing, if you are an Eldar and you die, you go straight to Slaanesh, the soul goes straight to Slaanesh. Is that true? You don't want to die. You just don't want to die then. Oh my gosh, at least they've got long lives, but still. Oh, but I thought their souls could come back. Or is it since Slaanesh they can't do that anymore? Oh dear. That's terrifying.
Where once they did not fear death, as they knew their spirit would be reincarnated and their life's knowledge preserved, now it could be ripped and consumed by the chaos god Slaanesh. To counter this horror, the Eldar developed spirit stones. These are the red orbs you'll see adorning Eldar armor, vehicles and weapons.
Okay.
The purpose is to absorb and store an Eldar's soul at the point of death, so that it can be then placed into a craftworld infinity circuit as a life source of information for the Eldar, and to save that soul from Slaanesh, ever watching, always desiring. Now the Eldar have been greatly changed by the fall, and their society is still reeling from the sheer scale of the horror it created for itself. And all the while Slaanesh is constantly stalking. They can never escape, and that's what they fear more than anything. But Eldar prophecies state, though, that one day their gods, some of whom were consumed and destroyed by Slaanesh, others were lost long ago during the Eldar War in heaven. It is said that they will one day rise again as the saviours of the Eldar, to see them take their place as the rulers of the galaxy once again. Whilst this might seem a hope of a doomed race, it's not out of the realms of possibility.
They are that
the
smart.
Eldar are one of the most powerful races when it comes to psychic powers, and the Eldar gods, as you remember, were weapons designed by the old ones to combat the Satan. So it's not somehow out of the realm of possibility that there's some truth to this. The Eldar gods could recombine, resurrect from the depths of the warp. If it were to happen, then perhaps this period of ruin among the Eldar would be viewed more as penance than actually as ruin. Now the Eldar had been shattered by these events and were left significantly weakened. To date, their fall had the largest impact obviously on themselves. But it's worth to keep in mind that the Eldar were the ones who originally caused the Necrons to retreat into their tomb worlds.
Yeah,
they had since then grown in strength many times over. But since the fall, all of this was lost, leaving them significantly weaker and more scattered than ever at the end of the War in Heaven. This could still have far-reaching consequences as the universe of the 41st millennium faces new threats from the awakening Necron and the invasive Tyranid hives. The Eldar's story is one which is far more significant than sometimes is given credit, and whilst many other empires are stronger than the Eldar in the current time, none are even close to what the Eldar had achieved with their own. The reality of the other younger and less powerful races such as mankind, Tau, Orcs, facing some of the most nightmarish forces in the universe is a sobering prospect.
Yeah, I mean, well, the fact they were such a great race, and they do have the potential to be once again. However, it's not going to be so easy this time, because they are, well, a lot of their knowledge, most of it was taken at the birth of Slaanesh. They're divided, and they have all these new threats there. They got the Tyranids all there, monsters. And you know, no other race is really tolerant of the other, because you just can't be in Warhammer. So it's going to be hard for them if he says, you know, is it going to be a time of, you know, are they going to be reborn, or are they just going to all die away? So, and we'll see. We'll see. I don't know what's going to happen. I kind of want to... For me, I don't think they're going to come back. I don't think so. Yeah, I think that's it for them. But my personal view. What do I know?
Eldar, if their prophecies of godlike resurrection and intervention prove accurate, could be the last true hope for the universe.
Oh, okay, so we kind of need them. I mean, it'd be cool if they just shred their
We'll be moving on
technology
from the Eldar now
and
to
psychic
look
powers.
at mankind and the Imperium and their place in the universe.
Ooh.
But we will revisit the Eldar in the future videos to look at their society, their weapons, their gods, and much more.
Thank you, Luetin.
So guys, please leave your thoughts below, and as always, please support me by rating the video, commenting, and checking out my previous content. I need as much support as possible with this series, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time when we learn more about the future of human history.
Can't wait either, Luetin. That was awesome. I love your videos. Thank you so much. Really, really interesting. And his voice is mesmerizing. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. We did learn a bit more there, and I did get a bit confused at the start, and I think it's after explaining some more things, I have got the part where the Eldar created their own like kind of gods with a bit more power, and then kind of assigned them. So that was something that I misunderstood at the start of that video. I know I probably sound like an absolute twat, but what can you do? It's just too much for me. But we did kind of get it in the end. And yeah, really, really interesting, the rise and fall, but it had an impact on the entire universe, and it still does today with Slaanesh and how she's just waiting for the Eldar. It's terrifying. Oh, and the fact that they could come back and help and save everyone, or just completely dominate again. That's another possibility. It's very interesting. I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't feel that way after hearing all that. And yeah, we'll see. I still think the Tyranids, from what I've heard, are just gonna absolutely bombard the universe and kill everything. Which is kind of sad because it just then puts an end to it. I'd love to know what your guys' thoughts are on what do you think is going to end the Warhammer universe this time round and create a completely new division of beings or happenings, you know, so or whatever. It's absolutely mental. But anyway guys, I'm going to leave it here for today's part. I think I've talked enough and I've confused myself enough, and probably you. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. You know what to do. Leave a like and subscribe. Let me know you love me, because I love you back. And I will see you next time for whatever that may be. Take it easy.